This morning on BRN, builders are sitting on a pile of unsold homes. Joining me now to help break it all down, Deidre Woollard is a real estate expert and journalist. Deidre, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us on the program this morning.
Glad to be here.
All right. I guess my first question to you is, let's talk about mortgage rates. They seem to be all over the place. Of course, we're recording this in advance of the actual release of the program. So mortgage rates will have changed presumably a number of times. But I want to get your reaction to this volatility and what does it mean for lenders? What does it mean for borrowers?
The idea that it will change multiple times between when we talk and when it airs is par for the course. That's part of the problem right now, is that nobody knows what's going to happen next. And if you can't predict things, it gets very hard to know when the right time is to buy. So if you're a borrower, and especially you're in the heart of buying season, there's a lot of inventory out there. You're ready to make your move, but then the rates suddenly spike up and you don't know, should you wait? Is the house still going to be there? So it's very problematic. And for lenders, they're seeing things all over the place, and certainly on not just on the acquisition side, but on the refi side. Most mortgage holders, about 72%, according to the FHFA, still have a rate under 5%. So there's no real reason to rush to refi. So that part of the business is still bad, but the acquisition side is just all over the place because of this volatility.
And Deidre, just to kind of follow up on that, aren't we isn't spring, summer, aren't those the typical seasons for selling? Because fall's not good typically because people have kids and they got to go back to school. So aren't we entering that prime time for sales and buying?
Well, that's the thing. We should be in the heart of it because technically they consider it starts sort of after Super Bowl, really ramps up in April. April is like the start of the frenzy, and we're seeing a lot of inventory, but we're not seeing that rush from buyers, and that's the part that's concerning.
Let's talk about home builders. Shared with you a story where they are sitting on a plethora, I'm going to use that cool word, I haven't used that in a while, a plethora of unsold homes. What they want to move their inventory. That is the point of building a home. You don't want to just keep it on the shelf. What does it mean for are they on hold too because no one knows?
Well, there's a couple of interesting things happening there. One thing that you and I have talked about before is that the builders have a little bit of flexibility because they can offer discounts on mortgages. They can do things that existing home sellers can't. So there's that. But the other wild card here is the will they or won't they on the tariffs. And depending on where the tariffs land, and they're as volatile as mortgages right now, it's all over the place. It's causing a lot of turmoil. Does that inventory become more worthwhile because we can't get new supplies, or new supplies suddenly become more expensive? You've heard home builders talk in recent months on earnings calls about how much inventory they have, but also how much inventory supply they have of things like lumber and steel. So you've got a couple of different factors going on there, but in some ways, having inventory usually feels bad, but may not end up being bad in this case for home builders. And it's interesting. I was listening to the Restoration Hardware RH call the other day, and the CEO was talking about how having inventory of their products is actually maybe a good thing for tariffs. So there's all of this concern about inventory, and what may have been bad before may turn out to be good.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but it's we're kind of all in a wait and see. Again, we're doing this show. It probably won't air for like another week or so. A lot can happen, but I think we're just trying to paint some broad brushstrokes here. Let me ask you about a real estate juggernaut that is forming. I think Rocket Mortgage is buying two other platforms. What does that consolidation mean for the industry, but also with all this volatility going on with mortgages?
Well, this is really interesting because Rocket made two massive acquisitions. The first one was Redfin for about 1.75 billion. The second is it's
That's
actually small
nothing.
compared to the acquisition
I know.
of
It just
Mr.
seems like
Cooper, which is an
these are big
all-stock
numbers.
deal of
Yeah.
9.4 billion. And the interesting thing is that Rocket will now represent 1 in 6 mortgages in the US if that deal goes through. So massive scale. And what they're doing is they're getting all sides of the process, right? So they're getting the funnel from Redfin of, potential buyers. They've already got the acquisition process and they're, one of the biggest in the business. Mr. Cooper gives them the servicing side. So they really get that full end-to-end exposure. And so the question that I'm wondering is this a good thing for consumers or a bad thing? So in some ways, it's it may be a good thing. It makes it an easier process. But I also get worried when there is a monopoly, that gives the monopoly holders a little bit more power than maybe we want them to have. And at the same time, we're seeing a lot of the large banks and even some of the smaller banks pull back on how many mortgages they offer. So we've seen over the last couple of years, we've seen different banks sort of closing or shutting down large parts of their mortgage business. So is the industry in general consolidating, and what does that mean for consumers? May not be all good news.
Deidre, as you know, in the audience knows I come from the retirement industry. Our industry is consolidating in terms of asset managers, but also the record keepers that do the service. Eerily similar. And, I share the same sentiment. I think competition is good. You get the best for the consumer. I also see the economies of scale. Let me ask you about the regulatory. Has this been approved? And I know you're not a regulator, but you listen to everything, you watch it. Has this been approved? Could the regulator step in and say, hey, ixnay on the consolidation here, we need more competition?
Hard to say. It used to be pretty easy to call in the last administration. Maybe. I don't think so, but there certainly is that possibility.
Yeah. Deidre, I want to completely shift gears and I want to talk about inheritance. Not my inheritance, not your inheritance, but what if you inherit from a loved one a home, and specifically a home with a mortgage? Are there things we need to consider, especially maybe if you haven't owned a home in the past?
It's complicated. There's a lot of things associated with both a mortgage. It could also be a reverse mortgage, which has its own complications. Because if you have a mortgage on a house, you can potentially take over the mortgage or you can refinance it. That you have some flexibility there. If it's a reverse mortgage, you may be in the position that you need to sell immediately. So that's one factor. There could also be other types of loans, home equity loans. There could be people put solar panels on. They get a loan for a period of years that then will also need to be satisfied. So it's very complicated. One of the things that I tell people is just you have to have these conversations with your family in advance. You have to know what's going on, and there are some solutions. You can just I don't give financial advice, but you could talk about putting something in a trust ahead of time. There are
Yep.
there are different solutions, and it varies for every family. But the conversation is the most important part, especially with those reverse mortgages. I've found from people I've talked to, elders have a little bit of shame about that sometimes. They don't want to say that they're in financial trouble, so they'll hide it. They won't tell they got a reverse mortgage or that they got some other loan, and then it becomes a surprise later. And that's also a concern if someone is moving from a home to long-term care as well.
Yeah. I think we all kind of feel shame if we don't follow the status quo. But in reality, I don't think any of us, I'm just going to say anecdotally, do anything perfect. I can attest, I'm not going to give out personal information, but I make a lot of mistakes. My wife will tell you that, but I make a lot of mistakes, and it's how you, and we all do. It's how you bounce back. But I think what you say is so important, because if you have a loved one, a mom and dad or a cousin, and they're going to will you a home, you need to think about the tax implications, how you're gonna move in, move out. What does that mean for them? And it all starts with the conversation, as you said. Deidre, excellent conversation as always. I love tapping into your great knowledge of not only real estate and the real estate market, but you just have great common sense, which obviously we need a lot of. Deidre, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website, and your subscription helps support all of this great BRN content. And we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll it.